Now let's look at Jamaica's debt composition. We're comparing two periods. December 2014 right here and December 2022. So we're looking at how the debt has evolved or how it has behaved from December 2014 to December 2022. Let's start off with December 2022. So the total debt as at December 2022 is 2,184,834,800,000. I'm sorry. It's 2,184,834,800,000. So 2.1 trillion. Uh, and it's broken down as follows. And this 2.1 trillion is Jamaican dollars. And it's broken down as follows. Domestic debt, 845,782,300,000. And that accounts for 38.71% of the debt. Now, domestic domestic debt would be like local bonds, maybe loans the government has taken from companies, maybe banks, corporations, local bond owners, any money that the government has borrowed locally. So local debt, in my opinion, is better than external debt because local debt, the government can borrow in local currency, which is Jamaican dollar, instead of external debt where we have to borrow in a foreign currency. And since our currency devalues against almost every currency that I know, it would cost more to repay external debt in external currencies than to pay local debt in local currency, which is what the government earns, taxes, etc. So domestic debt accounts for 38.71%. Now let's look at the the external debt, debt the external debt holders. So our external debt is broken down as follows. So bond holders 748 billion 34,500,000, and this accounts for 34.24%. Let's look at loans. Now these loans in green right here are bilateral loans. Bi, meaning two, maybe between the government and a country or an organization. So OEC is 1.8 billion or 0.08% of the debt. Now OECD stands for Organization for Economic Development, which is headquartered in Paris, France. And non-OECD loans 107 billion. Now the multilateral, multi standing meaning many. So we have the IDB. So IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, which is located in Washington, D.C. Now, no matter what comes before the word bank, it doesn't matter. A bank is somewhere that lends money. It lends money um, at, at an interest rate. So, no matter what comes, once bank is in the name of a word, it's an organization that lends money at an interest rate. So this right here, not free money. So the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, located in Washington, D.C., loaned us this money at an interest because they are a bank. So no matter what comes before the name, once you hear the word bank, it should trigger in you this entity is lending me money at an interest rate. So that's exactly what we have here. So 244 billion or 11% of our debt is from the IDB. So we have the IBRD, which stands for International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and it is the lending arm of the World Bank, 156 billion or 7.18% of our debt. The IMF, which we know pretty well, located again, all three of these, located in Washington, D.C., headquartered in Washington, D.C. So we know what that means. We have to be paying back these funds in the US dollars. So the IMF, 30 billion, 1.38% of our debt. And then we have others, 27 billion, 1.28% of our debt. Public bodies debt, 22 billion, 1.03% of our debt. All of these make up the 2.18 trillion. So 845 billion is domestic, 1.3 billion is external. Okay. Now let's compare 2014 to 2022 to see, you know, how the debt has changed. So in 2014, domestic debt was 1,046,900,000,000, or 51.33% of the debt. So we see that in 2014 we were doing better in terms of what percentage of our debt was domestic as opposed to what was external. So we have done worse in 2022, just 38% in 2022, compared to domestic debt accounting for 51.33% in 2014. Okay, let's look at the external debt. Bonds in 2014, 23%, 472 billion. We see that it has increased to 748 billion. Bilateral has gone down from 94 to, between these two, 108 billion. So it's gone down from 94 billion to 108 billion. We look at the multinationals now. The IDB, 162 billion. It's gone up to 244 billion. IBRD from 86 billion to 156 billion. IMF, 63 billion to 30 billion. So we have paid down the IMF. The IMF, but the IMF only accounted for 3.74% of our debt in 2014. So let's continue. Other 58 billion, that's gone down. Private creditors, 41 billion. All right, let's look at the total external debt. So the total external debt in 2014 was 992 billion. Total external debt in 2022 is 1.3 trillion. So it's gone up by about 300 and something billion. I mean, we have Excel here, so we can just simply calculate it. Equal this minus this. So it's gone up by 346 billion. External debt has gone up, and in domestic debt has gone down. So we are borrowing more from overseas, obviously paying in external currency, which means we're paying back more than if we borrowed locally. Okay, let's get this out of the way. All right, so let's look at some summaries down here. So we see that in 2022, domestic debt accounted for 38.71%, external debt accounted for 61.29%. Debt as a percentage of GDP was 83.12. And that's because GDP in 2022 was 2.6 trillion. The debt was 2.1 trillion. So debt to GDP was 83.19% in 2022. Let's look compare to 2014. Domestic debt 51%, so 2022 performed worse. External debt 48.67, here it's 61, also performed worse. But GDP, percentage of GDP. So GDP in 2014 was 1.5 trillion. The debt was 2 trillion. So the debt was 128.66% of GDP. So we see that in 2014, it has cut down to only 83.19% of GDP, which is good. You know, the less percent of GDP the debt is, the better we are performing. So that's a good metric for Jamaica from 2014 to 2022. Debt as a percentage of GDP has come down. But the debt itself has not come down, which simply means that the GDP has increased. So let's look at the debt itself and how it has increased, the actual figure. So in December 2014, the debt was 2 trillion 39 billion 700 million. In December 2022, it was 2 trillion 184 billion 834 million 800,000. So the difference between these two figures is 145 billion 134 million 800,000. That's an annual increase of 18 billion 141 million 850,000. Put it simply, the government, obviously the government has to be paying back some of its debt. So the government would have paid back some of this 2.3 trillion in 2014, but they would have also incurred some debt. So then when that nets off, the amount borrowed compared to what is paid net off to us borrowing 18 billion more per year for the last 8 years. So the overall debt has increased by $145 billion, right? So we are not paying down our debt. We are not paying down our debt. Our debt is increasing. And that cannot be something that's good for the country. Think about yourself as an individual. Debt, debt is not a good debt, not debt as in death, debt as in money borrowed. Be a good thing, cannot be a good thing unless you're investing that in something to generate more income than the interest and expenses that you're paying, which I'm sure the government is not doing. So we are increasing our debt, right? We are increasing our debt by 18 billion per year. And in my next presentation, I will show you how much interest we have to be paying on borrowed money, which is why I say there's no way we are recovering in terms of what we are investing the money in, the amount of expenses, the amount of interest we have to pay. And I'll prove that in my next presentation, right? So the debt has increased from 2014 to 2022 by 7.12%, or 145 billion in total, or 18 billion per year for 8 years. So what does that mean? Well, that simply means in 2014, the debt per person is 569,351 is Jamaican dollars. Now, how do we arrive at this figure? Well, the debt was 2 trillion and the population was about 2.7. 2.7 something per 2.7. Let's give you the exact figure. 2014, the population was 2.784543 million people. Now, if we divide this by the population, we get 569,351, which simply means every Jamaican owes $569,351. While we do not owe it directly, the country owes it. And as citizens, the national debt is on us. Whether it be through taxes or whatever, we are responsible for this debt, whether we believe it or not. Because the taxes we pay, the goods and services we generate, whatever taxes we pay over to the government goes towards debt repayment. Some of it goes towards a lot of it actually goes towards debt repayment. So each individual owes this money, 569,351. So whoever think, oh, I'm debt free, no. Indirectly, you owe 569,351, which you have never borrowed. You personally has never borrowed, but your country has. So in 2022, 2.1 trillion. 2022, the population is 2.82 million. Divide the total by the population, we get 928,889. So The debt per person between 20 from has gone up from 2014 to 2022 by 859 I'm sorry by $359,538. So each person in the population since 2014 has incurred additional debt of $359,533. If you found this video useful, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my YouTube channel.